Welcome to the Notes from Grey Hill. I'm Barry Robertson, and in this podcast, it's all about how audio theatre can work for your venue without reinventing your entire operation. Over this season, we're going to talk about how audio theatre is a practical revenue stream for your venue, something you can start this year with your existing artists and your existing programming. This first episode is about why audio theatre and why now. So let's name the crisis everyone knows about. So I'm going to tell you some statistics, and if you work in the arts, you probably already know this. If you're outside the UK, it's probably going to be fascinating as well. So since 2017, arts funding from national bodies across the UK has been cut by 16% in real terms. So local authorities, that's councils, have seen their arts investment cut by nearly a half since 2010. And here's what people don't always talk about, is even when venues do get funding increases, our costs have risen faster. So between 2019 and 2024, across 48 UK regional theatres, there's been a 15% drop in the number of performances. Not because the audience has disappeared. What's really interesting is actually audiences have increased by 2%. But it's because venues can't afford to programme as much as they used to. So when I look at Scotland, when venues got their 2025 funding uplifts, some as high as 54%, one receiver of regular funding said that while any uplift is welcome, if it doesn't keep pace with the real costs, it puts pressure on what we can deliver. And their costs had already risen by 65% in 5 years, which actually means you're programming less and less. And to be honest, in 2026, that's a pattern everywhere. 94% of theatre producers expect staffing costs to rise as a share of income. 75% are facing higher energy bills, and 1 in 5 venues needs at least £5 million over the next decade just to remain operational. And here, in my opinion, is what makes it harder. I think as an industry, we all know that we need to innovate. We also know that digital is going to matter more and more as we go into the future. But every time someone mentions going digital, I think for CEOs and artists, it sounds like you need to become a streaming platform. We need to hire a team. We need to build something from scratch that has nothing to do with why we really got into theatre in the first place. And I think it's also about clarifying what audio theatre isn't. What it isn't is about replacing live performance. It's not about becoming Netflix. It's not about pivoting away from what you do well. Audio theatre is about capturing value from the work you're already making and making it accessible to people who cannot be in the room. It's about, for me anyway, it's about turning a single performance into an asset that keeps working after the curtain comes down. And it's about doing this in a way that pays your artist fairly, respects union agreements, and doesn't require you to invest your entire organisation. Here's what we do know that works well, because we've seen it happen. So in New York, Audible Theatre has been commissioning and producing audio-first dramas for years. And they've proven that audiences will pay for high-quality audio performances, not as a backup and not as a substitute, as a format in its own right. So people will listen to the work on their commute, they listen while they're cooking dinner, they listen because they have caring responsibilities or chronic illness, or they live 2 hours away from the nearest theatre, or they just prefer consuming drama that's accessible in that way. Another model is very much the National Theatre Live, which proved something similar 15 years ago, that there's a massive appetite for theatre beyond the theatre building, but National Theatre Live for most theatre venues is very much expensive. For venues to license, yes, but also to produce, and it's centralised. So the infrastructure, the content, the revenue, it very much all flows back to one organisation. And that is not a criticism for somebody who I refer to as myself as only getting access to theatre by watching National Theatre's catalogue. It's done incredible work for access and for raising the profile of good quality theatre. But it's not a model that most theatres can replicate. You can't just decide to become National Theatre Live for your region. And if you look at individual releases of live theatre in cinemas, the ones that have been done so well, it's either got an A-list cast or it's a recognised piece of content, like Six, the musical, as an example. I would say audio theatre is different. So the reason why it's different is the technical requirements are simpler, the costs are lower, and crucially, you own it. Your theatre, your artists, your content, your revenue. And now with union contracts being put in place for rights and rates and royalties, the possibility now of accessibility expands. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. A few years ago, I was in a programme called Creative Informatics. It was there to support innovation within the arts sector, and it was from Edinburgh. And I had put in a project for doing audio theatre, and we did a live audio performance as a test, just to see if it could work. Not like a fully staged production that we recorded, it was very much a script in hand, audio first performance with an audience in the room that we captured and then released digitally. It worked very well, people bought it, and here's what got my attention. The feedback was really interesting because people were coming in not knowing what to expect. Some people were saying it was really great because I could close my eyes and use my imagination more. It was using senses that I didn't use fully before. But there was another thing through this, which I realised that it wasn't just about access. But what I found was people were buying the audio download from 50 miles away from the venue. That's people that couldn't travel to Ayr on the west coast of Scotland for a single performance. Or maybe people who weren't from the local region knew it existed, which can happen. But what made me really think is, if a theatre's catchment area is maybe 20 to 30 miles circular from the spot on a map, then that's quite good. If your roads and transport links are even better, that 20 might go to 30 to 40 miles and your catchment increases. But then there's barriers, do you have a babysitter? How am I getting there? What's the weather like? Is there sport on? There's so much competition around about that day. But for audio, once you've caught that audio performance, your catchment then becomes unlimited. So since then, that example that I've told you about, I've run trials with theatres, different sizes, different programming, different audiences, different locations in Scotland. And in every case, what I saw was the same thing. Digital sales coming from people who couldn't attend in person. Rural communities, people with disabilities, people working night shifts, for example, parents with young kids that couldn't get a babysitter, and in some instances, international audiences. Audio theatre doesn't replace your live audience. It adds to it. I think for me, the next thing to talk about is money, because I think money is always the most important thing, whether you have a board, whether you are here in the UK, which is risk adverse. You want to take risks, but you don't know what your audience is like. And I think it's basically one of the pinnacle things about creating content, isn't it? For me, a live performance generates revenue once, whether it is in a theatre, whether it's touring. And you get that money from ticket sales. Sometimes theatres will generate more income if they have income from a bar, for example. An audio recording of that same performance, so you go into the theatre, you see the live performance, and the audio's recorded, can still generate revenue for years after. It might not be a huge amount of sales, but it's a long tail income. It's a back catalogue. It's ultimately an asset to you. And here's the thing that makes this viable right now. I believe that the infrastructure is already here. It already exists. You don't need to build the streaming platform. You don't need to hire developers. You don't need to negotiate with distribution platforms and give them a chunk of your revenue. You need a partner who can provide you with an accessible store that supports your branding, your content, and your audience, and handles the technical back end so that you, as an artist, as a theatre venue, as a producer, can focus on what you do well, and that's making great theatre. I'll come back to this in a later episode, but the revenue model can flex depending on what makes sense for you. Whether it's a la carte purchase, a one-off purchase, like an audio download, whether it's a time-limited rental, whether it's a part of a subscription or a part of your educational outreach groups, bundling audio access with memberships or season tickets. The point is that I'm trying to say is, for anybody going on this journey into digital with audio, you now have options. And unlike a live performance, once you've made the recording, every sale after that is pure revenue. There's no additional costs, there's no capacity limits. So really, it's about thinking about how can we adapt to add this into our business. I also want to be honest about something. And the reason most theatres haven't done this already, I don't think it's not because they don't see the opportunity. I think personally it's because the barriers feel too high. So let me give you an example. For those of you that work in theatre, you're probably going amen right now. But you need to figure out the rights. You need to negotiate with the unions. You need to work out what's fair pay for a recording versus a live performance. You need to build contracts that protect your artists and give them ongoing royalty participation. You need to figure out what the technical setup is. And then you need to do all this while still running your building, managing your programme for your season, managing and supporting your team. I mean, it's just exhausting. And I think most audiences don't realise what goes on behind the scene of a working theatre venue. I say this because I think this is really important, because for anyone in that situation, they're not going to invest in it. But here's what I did to kind of make this a more easier process for all of us. So I spent years building those frameworks, learning and testing what the model would look like through that creative informatics example that I gave you with Edinburgh University. Last year, I was part of the Co-Start Ideate through Live Lab at York University, and that really gave me the scope to look at infrastructure, digital downloads, and also work with the theatre unions on audio theatre contracts and royalties, including good working practices, and about contracts that are fair, transparent, and union aligned. And I tested the model with real venues and real audiences to give me early insights. For me, being honest, I didn't do this because I wanted to become a rights lawyer or a tech developer. I did it because I wanted to remove barriers for theatres like yours. I've spoken to so many CEOs now in Scotland, and I'll always say there's no way me being based here in Ayrshire, which is on the west coast of Scotland, say for example, there's something on in Aberdeen which is like northeast. There's no way I'm getting on a train to go and see a show and come back, and it's like a 3-hour journey by train. So removing the barriers by creating digital is a really good working model, and that's what the Grey Hill is. We provide theatres with their own unique store to develop digital audio content, and what that means depends on your programming, right? So each theatre CEO, when I had conversations, wanted something completely different. And in every instance of what they asked me believe it or not, the answer was always yes. So to summarise, you don't have to start from a blank page. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can plug into existing infrastructure. You can start generating value. And you can start making work this year without huge costs of starting this on your own. I want to give you some examples now of some of the conversations that I've had with theatre venues this year, because I think it's really important to understand what each different type of organisations asked about digital and audio so that we can see what this looks like in practice. Let me give you some real examples of what theatre CEOs are asking for, because it's not one size fits all. Some venues come to me and say, Barry, we run a book festival once a year. We'd love to extend that programming throughout the year and create audio content we can sell all year round and engage with our audiences. Others will say to me, we've got brilliant musicians, but we can only program them for one night. We'd love to capture the performance and make it available to people who can't be here. Others would say to me, we really focus on new commissions and new writing, but we don't have the budget or the slots to stage everything. Could we do a script in hand reading, record them and release them as audio theatre? And others would say to me, actually all we do is live theatre productions. That's our main bread and butter. Could we capture the audio from these performances and sell them afterwards? And the answer to all those examples were yes. Audio theatre isn't a single format. For me, it's a toolkit. And depending on your programming, your audiences and your goals, you could use it in totally different ways. The key is starting with one project, testing it, learning from it, and building from there. I started this episode earlier, if you remember, about talking about my hometown in North Ayrshire, about growing up in a place where live theatre wasn't accessible to me. And I think I want to come back to that, because access is not just a nice to have, it's a strategic imperative. If you're a theatre in a rural area, you already know how hard it is to get people to get to your building. Most buses stop after a certain time at night, depending if football's on in your local area, depending on what's going on a Saturday night. There's lots of different competitors out there now. And for me, audio extends the reach without the cost of touring. I think what's really interesting for me is we serve all different types of audiences with disabilities, illnesses, caring responsibilities. And for me, audio removes the barriers of time and physical access straight away. Another interesting thing for me is looking at the statistics for audio and the younger generation. And I think if you're trying to engage with younger audiences into theatre or access to content, younger audiences are used to podcasts and headphones, and audio meets them where they already are. It's strategically more likely that they would take a first step into accessing audio content before they would then go into the live theatre. So audio meets that requirement. Another thing is, and I've done so many of these in my career, is about equality. We all have diversity and equality policies, and we're all about making sure that brilliant work doesn't just reach people in city centres or people with disposable income and free Saturday nights. Then really, audio for me is one of the most cost-effective tools that you have. And this isn't about replacing your access strategy. It really is about amplifying it. If you, like me, have wrote those policies and you really want to make a difference, I honestly think that audio is going to be one of the best ways that we can then take steps forward to making equality part of our infrastructure within our industry. For me, the beautiful part about audio is the same piece of audio that serves someone in a remote island community also serves someone with mobility issues in our own local town. Also serves someone who can't access theatre because they work constant night shifts and can't make evening performances. But it would also serve someone outside of your country where you program your work. The thing I think I want to say here is really about one recording equals multiple access points for audiences and further reaches audiences with the content that we're creating. So, here's where we are. You know you need to evolve. You know digital matters. And you know there are audiences you're not currently reaching and revenue you're not currently capturing. But you don't have the time, the headspace, or the technical capacity to build this from scratch. And that's exactly why I created the Grey Hill and where this organisation comes in. Our goal is to enhance theatres with a digital store that enables them to generate the income while supporting the local community and creatives. We handle the technical infrastructure, we support you with union-aligned contracts and rights frameworks, and we provide a model you can adapt to your programming and audience. So if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking, this could maybe work in our building, but we don't know where to start, well, I would love to talk. And you can find out more about the Grey Hill at our website, thegreyhill.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll leave those links in the podcast description. Before I go, I just want to talk to you about the next episode. So the idea for the next episode, if you're still not sure but want more information, then please do subscribe and stick with us. I'm going to be talking more about how audio theatre supports artistic development. So if you're part of an artistic development team, the people who nurture creativity, foster new talent and bring fresh stories to the stage, you know the challenge, brilliant scripts, limited stage slots and not enough budget to take risks on everything you love. Well, we'll talk about how audio theatre creates a development pathway, how script and hand readings can become recorded pilots, and how you can test new work with audiences before committing to a full production, and how this model protects creatives throughout this process. If you work in artistic development, literary, or producing, this next episode is for you. Listen, before I go, I just want to say thanks very much for listening. It takes a lot of time to find a podcast and get to the end and then make up your mind. Please do stick around. I think this is definitely going to be an insightful podcast for everyone to learn something new, think differently within our structures, and yeah, I'm hoping that this can be both a learning and engagement tool within our amazing theatre sector. Until then, I'm Barry Robertson, and this is Notes from the Grey Hill.